Okay, here we are. Sorry for the slight delay. Had a little electronic problem. We got it fixed. And we're up and running. We're going to spend the first hour tonight with two of the most talented, hardworking, nicest people in the field of ufology, Noe Torres and Ruben Uriarte. They have been, for years, investigating some of the most stunning UFO cases, crashes, and retrievals, you name it. And they're standing by right now. Ruben is in Northern California. I don't know where Noe is. Are you there, Ruben?
Yes, I am. We're up here in the Bay Area. And,
No, is Noe up there with you?
No, he lives in Texas.
Yeah, I know. I didn't think he was with you.
Yeah.
All right, now let's make sure he's there. Are you there, Noe? Can you hear me?
Yes, Jeff, it's been a while since we've been on your show, so
Too long.
I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah, I apologize.
So happy to be on.
Yeah, it's...
And, I'm located in South Texas. I'm about 10 miles from the border with Mexico in the McAllen, Texas area. So this is where I've lived my entire life, and Ruben and I have looked at a lot of interesting cases that have happened along the border, so it fits in.
Well, if it weren't for you two, we wouldn't have ever had Colonel Willingham on the program and his amazing memories of what he says happened to him. And I don't know how many other cases you've been involved with, but that was the one I remember the most.
We still get so many comments, Jeff, about the two programs that you did with Colonel Willingham before he passed away. I mean,
really?
Those are historic documents. Those are something that everyone should listen to, anyone that has any interest in UFOs, because we will never hear, unfortunately, from the gentleman again. As you know, and a lot of your listeners probably know, he passed away a few months back. So those are historic moments that you enjoyed on the show, and all your listeners enjoyed. I'm very thankful to have had the opportunity to have been a part of that and to have listened in as well.
Just a classy, fascinating gentleman, and he'll be missed, but thank goodness he was able to come on and do the programs, and we do have that. Well, those sound files, I guess, are on your site, right?
Yes, they're on our YouTube. Well, we took highlights, not the entire show, but we took some of the highlights of some of the talks he did on those two shows with you, and if people just go to our website, they can find a link to our YouTube videos with pictures of the Colonel as well and audio from your show.
You were, as I remember, Ruben, both of you were, at the time, still doing research into his background, trying to further validate the circumstances and the events that he reported on. Did you find anything else out?
Well, actually, in these cases, it's ongoing, and when Colonel Willingham passed away, Noe and I had very good. We were very lucky to have had good connections, good contacts with some of his former friends, and especially one person who was more as a caretaker, but also had many of his documents. So Noe and another friend of ours were able to go visit his home after he had passed away, and his good friend allowed Noe to scan many of the documents. Now, it's still ongoing, and it goes back to, let's say, Roswell. Even though Roswell happened in 1947, it wasn't until, I believe, 1978 or 79 until the researchers were started.
It was in the early 70s, yeah. Stanton Friedman was the man who opened the door on that, I remember.
Well, same with us in the sense that...
Ruben, can you talk a little louder, please? We're a little bit of low level here. We can get you right on that phone.
How does that sound there?
That's good,
okay,
thanks.
I'll put the microphone. What we found was, of course, both Noe and I, we've been working very hard in trying to obtain all these documents, and it still is ongoing. we haven't had the definite say, yes, we have this document. It's a series. It's like a detective work that we're doing.
Right.
And but
I want to
go ahead.
I want to just interject, Ruben. One of the key things that set us back is that about a year and a half to 2 years before he passed away, Colonel Willingham had a series of major strokes, which left him hospitalized for a really long time, and then he went to a retirement healthcare facility where he was basically taken care of 24 hours a day, and he lost the ability to talk. We were still in the process of, we eventually retrieved all of these wonderful original source documents, which
you
Ruben
did.
And I now have in our possession.
You got them all.
We did.
Wow.
We have a huge trunk load that his caretaker provided to us, and we're still actually going through that. There's a lot of records there that confirm beyond a doubt that he was a pilot. He was rated on many different types of aircraft. He was in the military service during the times that he said he was. We got pictures of him standing in front of various jet aircraft that he flew. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there. But as I say, we were in the process of trying to, because some of the records from his military service were destroyed in a fire at a military
I remember that too.
Facility.
Ruben, yeah. I think your mic is so sensitive it's picking up your breathing. I think so. I think we're hearing somebody's breathing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Stop breathing, Ruben.
Yes, Ruben. Suspend the breathing, will you, please?
So anyway, we were in the process of trying to get some of that verification going, Jeff. Unfortunately, when these series of strokes happened to Colonel Willingham, he was no longer able to verbally communicate, and actually his health deteriorated fairly quickly after that, and he, finally did succumb to his various diseases that he was
that couldn't have
from,
been too terribly long after we all got together and had him on the program here a couple times.
No, it wasn't. It was just months. If my memory, it was within a year that he started having strokes, and he had several in succession. And once the strokes hit, because of his advanced age and his other conditions, health conditions that he had, it went fairly quickly after that. But what Ruben and I are very thankful is that we got a chance to speak with him on numerous occasions, spent many, many hours with him at his home.
Yeah.
We, of course, wrote the book, which is basically his story told to us. And we recovered every single document that he had available at his home that his caretaker gave us after his death.
Wow.
So all of this, I think, is going to contribute in the long run to make a definite impact.
Now, when we go to the site, roswellbooks.com, you guys have 14 books out together, and again, several of those deal with cases that no one else has really gotten into. Which book is the one about Colonel Willingham's experience? It would be the Mexico's Roswell.
The Other Roswell.
The other one.
It's called The Other Roswell.
The Other Roswell.
Roswell.
Yeah, UFO crash on the Texas-Mexico border, and we call it The Other Roswell is because it was the main UFO crash retrieval case that a lot of major UFO researchers were looking at in the mid to late 70s before the first book about Roswell was published. There was a group that was trying to decide which of the two cases had greater merits and to bring it out into the national attention. And so there was a debate there among UFO researchers as to whether the Willingham case was stronger or the Roswell case was stronger. And
How interesting.
Finally, in the end, there was the group supporting Roswell is the one that came forward, and the first book was published in 1980. But interestingly enough, there was a series of documentaries and not books but articles about Willingham's case that were published years before the Roswell book was published. So in many respects, it was the other Roswell, the one that many UFO researchers thought might even be a stronger case of a UFO, of a legitimate UFO crash retrieval than the 1947 Roswell, New Mexico case.
If people go to the site, Ruben, where can they find the video about Colonel Willingham, one we're talking about? Is it on the homepage? Is there a link there somewhere?
No, I think, we have snippets of the video of some of our interviews with him. And
yes, we do. We have a link to our YouTube channel. Is what we have on RoswellBooks.com. There's a link there to our videos or our YouTube channel. And then once they hit our YouTube channel, they'll see every video that we've ever put online on YouTube. Every video will be there, including all of the Willingham material.
Good for you guys. That's really nice. I didn't know you were working on videos like this, and I'm on the site now, RoswellBooks.com, and there's a video window there.
But what's really interesting, I always call Noe a wizard because he's really great when it comes to all the anything relating to computer work and audiovisual, and he had put together this outstanding video of the actual crash site where Willingham had indicated where he crashed his airplane, or where the UFO had crashed.
He flew over it. For our listeners, just give our listeners a quick little thumbnail of the Willingham encounter. It's really a stunner.
Okay,
Noe, tell us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, we were working on another case when we several people, including Dr. Bruce Maccabee, a very well-known UFO researcher for years, dating back to the 60s, kept telling us about an incident that occurred in West Texas in the 1950s involving a pilot named Robert Burton Willingham. And his name appears rather prominently in a number of publications in the 60s in which he mentions that he visited the crash site of a UFO near Del Rio, Texas, which is along the border in southwest Texas, north of Laredo, and before you get to Big Bend National Park area. So Colonel Willingham had been telling this story. He told us that as close as he can figure, the incident happened in 1955. And so he began telling people. For a long time, he didn't feel comfortable talking about it because he had been basically threatened by his superior officers.
I remember that. Yeah.
And as he mentioned on your show, that he was told in no uncertain terms that he better not tell anyone what had happened to him on the border. So what did happen to him was he was in a military convoy of planes. He was flying an F-86 fighter jet, accompanying a bomber, a strategic bomber. B-47,
I think.
B-47, and it was engaged in, we don't know if it had live nuclear weapons or they were just dummies. We weren't sure. He didn't, the people that were flying alongside weren't told either way, but they were following the course that a bomber would follow in case a retaliatory strike against the Soviet Union at that time, against Russia, the Soviet Union, was necessary. In other words, if they had struck us, then we would send fleets of bombers headed toward Russia to drop our nuclear payload on several strategic cities and installations there. And the course that they would take would be across Texas, or for this particular wing, it would have been across Texas toward El Paso, and then north from El Paso along the west coast, and all the way into Canada, and then over the Bering Strait into Russia, into the Soviet Union.
They'd probably have to refuel in Alaska.
Oh, yeah, there were several refueling stops along the way.
Yeah.
Well, one of the refueling stops was Dallas, and that's where Colonel Willingham picked up the B-47 in his F-86, and they were headed to El Paso. He was going to break off, I don't remember if he, Ruben, I don't remember if he said he was going to break off in El Paso or once he got to New Mexico, but anyway, they were headed to El Paso, and they were about two-thirds of the way to El Paso from Dallas when there was a lot of radio chatter. All of a sudden, there were excited talking on the military radio band about an incoming, fast-moving object coming in from the northwest, from Washington State. It had been picked up by radar in Washington, near the Washington-Canadian border, and it was headed south at a very high rate of speed, over 2,500 miles per hour. And within moments of that, because of the high rate of speed, within moments of that, there was radio chatter that it had been spotted coming into the Texas area, where Willingham and the B-47 and the other F-86 pilots were traveling in formation. And so they saw it up close as it flashed in front of them. It did a 90-degree angle turn while they watched in amazement, because there was no kind of aircraft that they knew about could make a pinpoint 90-degree angle turn without slowing down from a speed of about 2,000
I want
miles per
to point
hour.
out to our listeners that this is really almost unprecedented to hear someone tell this story. Now, this craft, it was a disc shape, as I recall, actually in daylight flew in full sight of these aviators. It's just amazing.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And all of the men were later debriefed and told that they had not seen anything, that they were not to tell anyone. But anyway, they saw this huge glowing disc. Just suddenly, it came across the front of the B-47 and the accompanying fighter jets that were escorting it. Did a 90-degree angle turn, which made it head generally south toward the Texas-Mexico border. And Willingham received permission from his commander to go and check out, see what that was. Everybody was curious. And so he headed down in his F-86. He broke formation. The B-47 and the other jets went ahead on into El Paso after that, but he broke off and headed toward the border by himself. And he overflew the UFO crash site. He followed a vapor trail headed down to near Del Rio, Texas, and just a little bit north of Del Rio, in a small town called Langtree. He saw that the object which he had noticed that the altitude was declining rapidly. It was either going to try to land or maybe it had lost control, but it did end up making an impact landing. It scraped a huge trench he could see from the air in his F-86. He brought it down low. He scraped a huge trench just on the south side of the Rio Grande River, and then he saw the debris. It was a disc-shaped object. It had broken up into several pieces, but the main part of the hull was still intact. And so at that point, he returned to Dallas, to Fort Worth, to Roswell Air Force Base, and turned in his jet and came back down to the border in a small
He got a private plane. It went back, folks. Just
he was very much into the Civil Air Patrol at that time, so he picked up a Civil Air Patrol trainer plane used for training missions, and he and a friend of his, Jack Parsons, who was an electrical engineer, flew back down, wanting to see what the heck that object was. And so they flew back down. Took them quite a while in that small plane, but they ended up getting back to the Del Rio area and landing alongside the wreckage. And by the time they arrived, the object was encircled by troops.
Now, these are Mexican military, correct?
Yes.
Some of them had Mexican military uniforms on them, but others he wasn't so sure about. They seemed, and they spoke English, and he didn't know what to make of the uniforms that they were wearing.
Well, we probably had our immediate response teams even then following these things, and they could be on location within minutes. They were very quick. So at any rate,
and I've wondered I wondered, Jeff, if they might not have been wearing Mexican Army uniforms, but not been Mexicans.
I know that's an interesting angle. Yeah, all right, we have to take a break. We'll come right back and hear some more of this from Noe as Ruben and I and all you folks get back together again on the other side of the break. Stay right there. Okay, and we're back. Ruben Uriarte and Noe Torres. We're hearing from Noe the story of Colonel Willingham. If you're in the archives, if you're a subscriber, you can hear both of the complete programs with Colonel Willingham, and they are really amazing. This crash, no one knows why. Any idea about the cause of the crash? Were there any reports or whispers or rumors about it having been shot at or otherwise intercepted somehow?
Well,
Ruben has done extensive research into, and Ruben, you want to talk about the chasing of UFOs that our military was doing at that time?
Those, yeah. By the way, just for our listeners, 1954, 55. The golden age of ufology and UFOs and contact with non-human intelligence here in the 1950s, and certainly no more intense years than 54, 55, maybe 53. The book by Frank Fuscino, Shoot Them Down, is a stunning compilation of all of these operations and interceptions and what happened. We lost dozens and dozens and dozens of aviators and aircraft to these craft. It was a war, basically.
Exactly.
We lost more fighter pilots during that period of time here in the United States than all of Korea. Based on what the statistics that Fuscino had put together.
It's stunning. But it was a war.
It is.
It was an aerial war against UFOs, and nobody knows about it.
The thing that we found intriguing in our research, both Noe and I, was when we first got started, we were focusing on the crash that occurred in Coyame, Mexico, in 1974. But as we start getting into the research, and of course, we start connecting with these other UFO crashes, and mysteriously, it all occurred right very close to the proximity of the U.S.-Mexican border. So we have 3 or 4 crashes already, and there's maybe more out there. But why they're crashing? I mean, we've been speculating. I came across a document that was dated in 1950. Where in this document it was FBI memo that basically stated that that there were several crashes of UFOs in New Mexico, and it might have been caused by a high-powered radar. Somehow that radar and its frequency had the ability to disrupt the flight mechanisms of those UFOs, causing the crash.
Yeah.
So there might be some other reasons, but as Noe had mentioned, our pilots, they had orders to shoot them down. And, of course, many of our pilots never came back.
Remember, the name of the book is Shoot Them Down by Frank Fuscino. Just remember, Shoot Them Down. I think it's Amazon, and it is well worth reading, as are all of Ruben and Noe's books.
Jeff, I wanted to mention there's been a new development that's Ruben and I are still working on in the Willingham case, because among his personal papers that we were given after his death, there was something really interesting and unexpected that kind of floored us.
What's that?
There was a little piece of metal stuck in with all his important papers.
He's a sly one.
Yeah, and he had never mentioned to us. That he had any artifacts. He did recover a fist-size chunk of whatever a piece of the object that fell that day and across the Rio
They took
Grande.
it away from him, didn't they?
That was taken away from him when he turned it in for analysis. But Ruben and I were always scratching our heads and thinking, Colonel is a sly one, and if anybody would think of keeping a little piece for himself, chipping off a little piece, he would certainly be the one to do that. And so right there we discovered, in the trunk, we were given a trunk load of all his documents. There was this tiny little piece carefully wrapped up.
How big? About?
It was about 2 inches across, and we weighed it, we measured it, and we took it to our local university for analysis. And what's really, really interesting is when the analysis came back, Jeff, Ruben and I were just like, oh gosh, well, it's just a common type of material. It ended up being graphite, but what was interesting is the professor that ran the analysis using all kinds of fancy equipment that they have now, computer analysis and so forth, he kept looking at the peaks and the structure of the graphite over and over. There was a visual representation on this screen, and he said, well, this is kind of unusual. This is some kind of manufactured graphite. It's not a naturally occurring graphite. There was something that caught his eye, and he kept going over the visual representation of the piece of metal over and over on his equipment, and he couldn't quite come to terms with it. Well, I did some research after the fact, and it turns out that graphite is used in all kinds of aerospace applications, from the space shuttle, rockets. It played a huge role in development of stealth aircraft because of its radar and radiation absorbing properties.
Right.
Graphite is not something that is altogether that common, especially this particular chunk that Colonel Willingham, for some reason, is the only non-paper material that we found in his belongings after he passed away.
How was it wrapped up, Noe? How was it wrapped up? You said it was wrapped up carefully.
It was in a little cloth coin purse, the kind of coin purse that kind of snaps at the top.
Sure, yeah.
So we unsnapped that, and we looked in there, and there's this piece of kind of dark metal, and we took it out carefully using gloves, and we took pictures of it, we weighed it, we measured it, and we arranged to have it analyzed. So, that to me is very puzzling. Why, of all his earthly possessions, where he kept his most important documents and papers, would he keep this little piece of metal?
I think we can answer that with reasonable certainty. And Colonel, if you're listening, I think Noe and Ruben got the message, and they got the article. Now, when you dropped it off for analysis, I guess you had to leave it in the hands of the scientists.
No, he was willing to do it while I waited.
Good. That was my next question. Yeah, I would never let that out of my sight, because you're on the phone, you're talking or whatever, and who knows?
Ruben and I also purchased a Geiger counter specifically to test the sample, and it was, of course, radioactive. It was not radioactive. It was radioactive dead. So we wanted to make sure of that before we went around handling it and having other people handle it. But
now,
as I mentioned,
Ruben, go ahead.
Graphite isn't interesting.
Oh, I just wanted to jump in real quick, Noe, but in relation to this announcement, you're the first one to know this, Jeff. We have not made this announcement to anybody.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you both for sharing that. Don't leave it with me; they'll come after me. But I'm sure, you've got it put away very nicely, and that's terrific. Bless that man. That was very smart of him. Because this craft, now understand, when he was on the ground and he went up to this craft, this is fascinating. We were going to talk about another crash. We'll have to do that another night. But I would urge all of you to go listen to the Colonel Willingham radio broadcasts. There are two programs. And tell him what happened. He's on the ground. He wants to get closer to the thing. It's surrounded by armed, what appear to be Mexican military, but that's really kind of up in the air. But anyway, tell us more. This is really interesting.
Well, he was, he was there with Jack Perkins, his friend, and they were on the ground, and they set down that small plane of theirs just a few, maybe 50 or 100 feet from where the trench that the object dug as it crashed into the ground was. And the whole area was just swarming with what looked like men in Mexican Army uniforms. But Colonel Willingham was always struck by the fact that a lot of them were speaking English.
Well, it's right on the border, too. That's another issue. Right smack on the border. And they're probably American... Yeah, go ahead.
Right. It's also in a place that's, for lack of a long description of it, it's a godforsaken, middle of nowhere place. You don't go there unless you know something's about to happen or you've been tracking something. There's no easy way to get there.
I see.
And really, the easiest way to get to the crash side is from the U.S. side, because the Mexican side is just rugged, mountainous, desert terrain, hundreds of miles from any town of significant size. So, I've always believed that the men that Colonel Willingham saw there at the site came from the U.S. side. No, I just don't.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Noe. Because after we published the book, we were very fortunate to have received a copy of a documentary, a Japanese documentary about Willingham that was released in 1978, and we had the documentary transcribed into a transcript in English. And then one of the things that we found out was that Willingham said that there were two Navy intelligence officers that were there among the wreckage.
There you go.
There was a connection. Then, of course, that just ties in that CIA has one of the largest headquarters based in Mexico City, so they're keeping very much, monitoring all the anything out of the ordinary in Mexico and Latin America.
Two questions. One, when Colonel Willingham flew over the crash scene in his F-86, which probably was not much more than a minute or two after impact, there was no one around. Nothing.
Not a soul. Not a soul.
And about how long did it take him to get back there on that private plane or the CAP plane?
Seems to me that it was about 4 or 5 hours, all the way from the Corsicana, Texas area back down to the Del Rio area.
Plenty of time for the U.S. to send a team in there. Was there?
Absolutely.
Did he describe vehicles there, trucks, 2.5s, or anything like that?
He saw all kinds of vehicles and various. He said some of them were civilian-looking vehicles, and some of them were military vehicles like trucks and jeeps. There was an odd, that was another thing that struck him. He said it was an odd assemblage of different kinds of vehicles that were kind of encircling the crash scene. And all these people were busy running to and fro and some of them were getting close to the wreckage. He got as close as he could to the wreckage. There were men with automatic weapons pointed at him, keeping him away. They told him he couldn't get in close to the main part of the wreckage, but he finally was able to. He was pretending to talk with the officer who seemed to be in charge and gave him some of his cigarettes, and he kind of edged up close to the main part of the wreckage, and that's where he saw some bodies inside. He said they were very skinny, large heads, large eyes, and they were only one. He said he thought he saw 3 or 4 bodies, but only one was completely intact. The other ones were pretty mangled. And it was, he said he only caught a glance for just a second or two, and then they redirected him and had him move away.
Was he wearing his military uniform, his pilot's uniform, or something to identify him at that time? Do we know?
Yes, he was wearing his Air Force reservist.
Got it. Okay.
Pilot uniform.
Flight suit.
See, this is a big story, and that's why when he was on with you two, I was just floored. And
there's another. He made a statement that I thought was pretty profound, and I looked at Noe, especially when he said that when he was at the crash site, he noticed that some of the Mexican soldiers started to put their blankets real close to the wreckage where it was hot, where there's still some fire in that. And they were putting those blankets, warming up the blankets, and then they put the blankets around themselves because it was starting to get cold. And he said, that's not a good idea. Because what if there's a possibility of contamination, from radiation?
Of
radiation,
course.
Yeah. Hey, he shared that. I could just see these soldiers wrapping themselves with blankets, warming them up.
It gets cold out there in the desert at night, as Ruben and I recently experienced. We went out there to film a program for the Travel Channel, Mysteries in the National Parks, that'll be out in a couple of months. So we were not too far from the Willingham crash site, as a matter of fact, when we were filming there a couple weeks ago. So it gets cold at night.
Was there anything further that he heard about that? Now, there was another crash allegedly attended to by Mexican military, and a lot of those men died. I've forgotten which crash that was.
That happened near Presidio, Texas. Yeah, that's several hundred miles away, and that happened much later. Yeah. Willingham's incident was 55, and the Coyame crash, where the soldiers apparently were all killed by being exposed to something that was leaking from the crashed UFO, happened in 1974.
I see.
So quite a time span between the two incidents. But that was a convoy of soldiers that was dispatched out there to retrieve what they thought was a crashed plane. And they did find the crashed airplane, but they also found this silver disc that had slammed into the plane, causing both craft to go down.
Well, we did a program on that, and the pilot, I've forgotten the details about the pilot, but yeah, he was flying, and this thing hit him. He was in a single-engine plane.
Ruben and I were actually working on that case when we heard about the Willingham story, and at first we were thinking maybe it was the same case, but then we realized it was separated in time and in geographic location. So we have two separate interesting UFO crash stories, both along the Texas-Mexico border.
Somewhere, Ruben, go ahead. Yeah.
I also, just to add to that, I believe we had on your show, we brought a gentleman who was a pilot who flew a small airplane.
Yes.
Where his plane was surrounded by 3 UFOs that occurred over in Mexico.
That's right.
That's also should be added to the list of so the audience can hear that from Carlos de los Santos, which ties into our.
He was an excellent eyewitness experiencer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that somewhere we have a lot of crashed extraterrestrial, non-human, engineered and constructed technology. And we have probably dozens of bodies over all the years. We have crash retrieval teams. These retrieval teams go 24 hours a day. They're injected into a location. They secure it. They let no one there. They warn the locals about talking. They do all that kind of debriefing and threatening. And then the object is hauled away, or the debris is hauled away, and the ground is smoothed out. There's nothing left. Bravo, Colonel Willingham, for doing that. And I think your message was received loud and clear by Ruben and Noe. That's just great.
And I do want to add, Jeff, that at no point did Colonel Willingham ever truly believe that what he saw was a man-made object or that was from this Earth.
I remember that.
He never believed
from him. Yeah, no, he was.
He knew exactly what it was that he was facing. It was not from this Earth. What was his feeling?
I wonder if. Oh, it's fascinating. I wonder if any of the men on the scene were ever afflicted with anything, had any wrapping themselves in blankets warmed by the hot wreckage. Wow. That's kind of nutty. And you think about it, but I guess in 1955, people weren't thinking like they are now.
No, in fact, they probably didn't know that much about radiation quite yet, the dangers of it. I mean, it was still early in the game for assessing radiation damage to living tissue and so forth. But,
right.
Yeah, I'm certain that some of those men probably had some effects.
I would think so. I also have always wondered about these crashes and the crew. We sometimes think of them as little grays or little men that have no feelings. Maybe they had feelings. Maybe they had families. Maybe they were ranked. Maybe there were lieutenants and captains and crewmen and Air Force techs that are flying. Who knows? But this is obviously very, very much more complicated and sophisticated than most people would relate to. You have to think about that. These are living beings one moment and then they're dead. Same with Roswell and so many other crashes.
Yeah, they're explorers from another world, and they're coming here and facing the different challenges, and many of them are not returning back to their home planet
or mothership, whichever brought them.
As well.
That could easily be it. With the reports that we have and you guys deal with, some of these craft are miles across and or a mile. It doesn't matter.
I really don't. Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. I don't think these smaller craft, like what crashed in Koyame or even in the Del Rio area, I don't think they are interstellar type craft. I think they're scout ships.
I agree.
Sort of like what Donald Shrum saw in the forest, where the beings came out and they caused them to go into the tree, and he saw the smaller scout ship come out of one of the openings in this huge 150-foot line.
Yes. Now, is his son still alive?
His son is, Dan Shrum.
Yeah, he's the one that we had on the program.
Exactly.
And he recounted the story of his father. What a story that is, too. So that's also in the archives here. Do you have? Go ahead.
Don Shrum just passed away about 2 weeks ago. On February the 6th.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I don't think we had formally announced that. It was very, very sad. He had been quite ill for some time, and he was unable to do any more interviews. But luckily, we got his story down, and we got him on video talking about what happened. And we'll come back and do another show, Jeff, where we'll talk about Donald Shrum's amazing case.
Yeah,
and maybe once things settle down with his family, we can get Dan back on as well.
Okay, how old is Dan now? About?
I would say in his early 40s.
Okay, good.
Oh, 30s. Okay.
Well, he knows the story very, very well. So we can certainly do that. And in the archives is the man that went through it. That whole program. If you need, you've got those sound files, those programs, don't you?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, those are gold. I'd put those up on your site if you can. You certainly have my blessing. But they're.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
They should be listened to all the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Because all this is all history.
Oh, it's very important. What a story that was. All right, we'll have you gentlemen back on real soon. Stay in touch, and maybe the week after next, something like that, we'll do it. And in the meantime, great to talk to you again. I always enjoy having you with us, and the people out there listening are so open-minded, and they really appreciate your professionalism and your care. Thank you very much, both of you.
Well, thank you for having us on. We really enjoyed it.
Okay, Noe.
Good night.
Thanks, Ruben. Okay. Night. All right, two great guys, fascinating information, and again, in the archives, look for Colonel Willingham, and then look for Ruben and Noe, and you'll find